Can you truly be happy alone? Or do we all need friends, especially in old age? That's the question I've asked myself over the years, and one I'm sure many of you have pondered, too. Society loves to tell us that our happiness is tied to the people we surround ourselves with, our family, our friends, even acquaintances we don't know all that well. And as we get older, there's a clear expectation: we should maintain those connections, we should fill our lives with social gatherings and keep up with an ever-growing network of people. But as I've aged, something unexpected happened. I began to realize that there's another side to this conversation, one that challenges the conventional wisdom. There's a deeper truth about solitude and the role it plays in our happiness as we get older. The answer isn't as simple as we might think. It's not just about filling our days with endless socializing, nor is it about isolating ourselves completely. Instead, it's about discovering the balance between solitude and meaningful connections. And that's what we're going to explore today. As we grow older, the pressure to maintain a busy social calendar can feel more burdensome than ever. In our youth, we were told that friendship equals success. The more friends, the better, right? Our value was often measured by the number of people who showed up to our events or the number of texts we received each day. But as the years pass, we realize that something shifts. What was once exciting can feel exhausting. Socializing, at times, becomes a chore, an obligation, rather than something we genuinely look forward to. Aging complicates this even further. With time, our energy levels, mobility, and social circles begin to change. Friendships that once seemed essential start to feel less significant, and we begin to crave something different. This is where solitude comes into play. But this isn't about loneliness or isolation. It's about using solitude as a space for growth, self-reflection, and, believe it or not, joy. Today, I want to explore how solitude doesn't have to be something to fear or avoid. It can be an opportunity, a chance to reconnect with ourselves, find inner peace, and rediscover what truly matters in life. And through this journey, I've come to understand that it's not about having a large group of friends, but about having the right relationships, those that nurture us, not drain us. As we age, one of the most important things we learn is self-reliance. The idea that happiness comes from within, not from others, can be a revelation. We no longer need to seek external validation or chase after fleeting moments of social approval. The question changes from, how can I please others, to, how can I be content with who I am? Self-reliance doesn't mean we cut ourselves off from the world or from loved ones. It simply means that we no longer feel compelled to be everything to everyone. Instead, we can focus on nurturing the relationships that truly matter, those that are grounded in trust, respect, and shared experiences. In old age, we find peace not in the quantity of friends, but in the quality of connections. And speaking of connections, the nature of friendship changes as we age. It's not about accumulating a network of acquaintances, it's about forming deep, meaningful bonds. As we reflect on our lives, we realize that the friends who have stayed with us through thick and thin are the ones who matter the most. Those friendships, built on years of mutual understanding and love, become more valuable than ever before. Lastly, the balance between solitude and social interaction is key. There's a misconception that being alone means being lonely. But I've learned that solitude isn't a void, it's a space where we can recharge, reflect, and rediscover our passions. At the same time, we don't need to reject social interaction entirely. The key is finding a healthy balance. It's about creating time for both, peaceful moments of solitude and meaningful connections with the people who matter most. So, as we dive into this conversation, I invite you to think about your own relationships, both with others and with yourself. What does true happiness look like for you? How can you embrace the freedom that comes with living joyfully, whether you're surrounded by others or simply enjoying your own company? Let's explore this idea together. When you're young, society pushes you in certain directions. You're constantly told that the more friends you have, the better. You need to keep your calendar full, go out all the time, attend every event, and always be on the go. But when you really stop and think about it, why is that the expectation? Why is being constantly surrounded by people seen as the ultimate goal? At that age, you rarely stop to question the logic behind it. You just follow along, thinking it's the right thing to do. After all, everyone else seems to be doing it. Your worth is often measured by how many people are around you, by how busy you are, by how many events you attend. You hear people say things like, "You're young, go out, make memories, live your life." And so, you do. The need to constantly be social, to network, to accumulate a large circle of friends becomes ingrained in you. But, if you really think about it, how often do you actually feel connected to those people? In the midst of all the chaos, the rush of socializing, do you truly find any peace? Or are you simply going through the motions, trying to fit into a mold that everyone else seems to be following? This pressure to be constantly social can feel overwhelming at times, yet it's what you're told to do. And as you grow older, you might look back and wonder, was that really necessary? In my younger years, friendships often felt like a race. It wasn't about the quality of the connection but rather the quantity. You wanted to be seen as someone who was well-liked, someone who could say, "I know this person and that person." You surrounded yourself with people, not because you felt an authentic connection, but because it validated you. It was about feeling important, feeling accepted. It wasn't uncommon for friendships to form based on status, who you knew, or the places you went. And the more people you knew, the more valuable you seemed in the eyes of others. But looking back now, I realize how shallow many of those connections were. They weren't real friendships. They were more about convenience, fitting into the right groups, and gaining approval. They were based on external factors, not on a deep understanding of one another. Think about it. How many friendships from those years have stood the test of time? How many were truly meaningful? How many of those people you called friends are still in your life today? The truth is, many of those friendships weren't built on anything solid. They were momentary, tied to a certain time in your life, or to a shared activity. But as time goes on, the things that once seemed so important, the number of people you could call your friends, the social events you attended, start to lose their significance. What truly matters becomes clearer as you move forward in life. It wasn't until much later that I came to a hard realization: most of those friendships I'd spent so much time nurturing were shallow. They didn't offer lasting fulfillment. There was a sense of emptiness that followed after the initial excitement of being part of a large group, of being constantly surrounded by people. But when I looked closely, I realized I was often more alone in those moments than when I was by myself. Have you ever had a friendship like that? One where it felt like you were just going through the motions, where the connection didn't go beyond surface-level pleasantries? Maybe you laughed and chatted, but deep down, you felt like something was missing. It's a feeling I can't quite describe, but I'm sure many of you know it well. What I learned from those experiences is that true friendships aren't about appearances or quantity. They're about depth. They're about being able to connect with someone on a level that goes beyond just showing up at the same events. It's about understanding each other without needing to fill the space with noise. Sometimes, those shallow friendships can be draining. They can leave you feeling more isolated than before. And eventually, you realize that the effort you put into them might not have been worth it. Think about the friendships that felt empty. What did they teach you? How did they shape your understanding of what friendship really is? As time passed and I grew older, I began to notice a shift. The constant socializing didn't seem as appealing anymore. In fact, I started to value solitude more and more. What had once felt like an obligation, being constantly surrounded by people, was now something I sought out less and less. Instead, I began to appreciate the quiet moments. A simple walk in the park, the sound of birds chirping, a cup of coffee on a quiet morning. These moments of solitude became my greatest joys. It wasn't about running around from one event to the next or keeping up with an endless stream of social obligations. It was about being at peace with myself, embracing the stillness that I had once feared. You see, as you age, something changes inside you. The drive to impress others, to stay busy just for the sake of it, fades. You no longer feel the need to fill your time with activities just to show that you're living a full life. Instead, you start to find beauty in the simple, quiet moments. These moments of solitude aren't about being alone, they're about being with yourself, finding joy in your own company, and realizing that there's no need to fill the silence with anything more than what's necessary. In the past, I might have been uncomfortable with being alone, but now, it feels like a space for reflection, creativity, and peace. Of course, there's always the lingering fear that comes with aging. What if you end up alone? The thought of loneliness can be daunting. Society paints a picture of aging as a time of isolation, where everyone fades away and the world keeps moving forward without you. But the truth is, loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness can leave you feeling empty, desperate for connection. It's a feeling of being disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people. But solitude, on the other hand, is a choice. It's a decision to spend time with yourself, to reflect, to grow, and to appreciate the moments that many others might overlook. Loneliness can feel heavy, but solitude is liberating. It allows you the space to connect with yourself, to find clarity, to listen to your own thoughts, and to discover parts of you that were previously hidden or ignored. It's a chance to understand who you are, what you truly want, and what brings you peace. And as you get older, you begin to understand that solitude is not a curse, it's a blessing. I remember one afternoon, I sat alone by the window, watching the sunset. I had been alone for most of the day, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lonely. There was a strange kind of peace in it. I realized in that moment that I wasn't really alone. I had myself, and that was enough. It wasn't an emptiness I had to fill with noise or distractions. It was a deep, quiet sense of contentment that I hadn't known before. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most meaningful connection is the one you have with yourself. It was in those quiet moments that I realized I didn't need to be constantly surrounded by others to feel complete. I had everything I needed in that moment, the peace, the solitude, and the understanding that I was enough. Solitude, over time, became more than just something I endured. It became a tool for personal growth, creativity, and even self-love. In the stillness, I found clarity. I learned to appreciate the small things, the sound of the wind, the rustling of leaves, the warmth of the sun on my face. Solitude became my sanctuary, a place to recharge, to reflect, and to connect with the deeper parts of myself. It allowed me to focus on what truly mattered, without the distractions of the outside world. There's a certain power in being alone. It's in those moments that you discover the depth of your own thoughts, the strength of your own will, and the beauty of the world around you. Solitude teaches you to embrace who you are, to love yourself without needing external validation. It's a space for introspection, for self-discovery, and for finding peace within yourself. The power of solitude isn't just in the quiet, it's in what you do with that quiet. It's in the growth, the reflection, and the peace that comes from spending time with yourself. As the years go by, something changes inside of us. The constant rush to be social, to have an ever-expanding circle of friends, begins to lose its appeal. When we're younger, we're taught that the more friends you have, the better. The more people you know, the more valuable you are. Society pushes us to always be connected, to network, to accumulate acquaintances. But as we grow older, we start to see things differently. We begin to realize that there's more to life than the number of people we can call friends. The focus shifts from quantity to quality. Think back to the people in your life. The ones who have truly been there for you, not because it was convenient, but because they genuinely cared. How many of those people are there? How many of them still stand by you, even when times are tough? It's not about having hundreds of people around. It's about the few who make the effort to show up, not just when it's easy, but when it matters most. Family, a few close friends, long-standing relationships, these are the bonds that last. They are the ones that provide us with deeper, more fulfilling connections. They don't need to be explained in big gestures or flashy displays. Sometimes, it's the quiet moments, the ones where you don't have to say much at all, that matter the most. Think about the relationships that have lasted. What makes them different from the others? Is it the shared history? The mutual understanding? The fact that, through it all, you still choose to show up for each other? It's in these relationships that we find true value, and it's these bonds that grow stronger as we age. Now that we know how important these deeper connections are, the next step is to understand how we can nurture them. It's not always easy, especially when the world around us seems to be focused on the surface level of things. But the truth is, building lasting relationships doesn't require a huge effort, it requires sincerity. One of the most powerful tools for building deeper connections is active listening. How often do we listen just to respond, instead of truly hearing the other person? A deep conversation isn't about talking over each other or filling the silence. It's about being present in the moment, truly paying attention, and offering your full, undivided attention. When you listen this way, you build trust, and trust is the foundation of any lasting relationship. Empathy is another crucial part of nurturing relationships. It's easy to get caught up in our own lives and forget what others are going through. But showing empathy, taking a moment to understand someone else's feelings, to offer comfort or advice when it's needed, helps strengthen the bond between people. It's these moments of vulnerability, when you share your heart and hear the heart of another, that form the kind of friendships that endure. Being present is just as important. In today's world, it's easy to be distracted. Our phones are always buzzing, and our minds are often miles away from the conversation at hand. But when you give someone your full attention, when you truly show up for them, it's a simple but powerful gesture. It says, "I value you. I care about what you're saying. You matter to me." And when you offer that to someone, you create a space for a deeper, more meaningful connection. Think about it. A deep conversation with an old friend is so much more enriching than attending 5 different parties. It's the kind of conversation where you don't need to impress anyone, where you can be real, vulnerable, and honest. There's no need for surface-level pleasantries. You can simply be yourself, and that's enough. And when you find relationships like that, you realize that all the effort you once put into maintaining a large social circle was just a distraction. The true joy comes from those fewer, deeper connections. As we age, we start to understand that we don't have to live up to society's expectations anymore. We don't have to constantly meet new people, attend every social gathering, or keep up with the latest trends. The pressure to be always on, always surrounded by people, starts to fade. And with that fading comes freedom, the freedom to live life on our own terms, without constantly seeking approval from others. I can remember the moment when I realized I didn't need to attend every social event just to please others. It wasn't a grand moment or a dramatic shift, but a quiet understanding. It came one evening when I decided to skip yet another gathering, not because I didn't care about the people there, but because I needed a break. And as I sat alone, I realized something that changed my perspective. My worth wasn't determined by how many events I attended or how many people I knew. It was determined by how I felt inside, by the peace I found in simply being myself. Once that realization hit, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I no longer had to chase after validation or measure my worth by the number of invitations in my inbox. I could let go of the constant need for social validation and instead focus on what truly mattered. What mattered wasn't the parties or the crowded gatherings, it was the quiet moments of reflection, the connections that were real and genuine, and the ability to simply be content in my own company. True happiness doesn't come from external sources. It doesn't come from the approval of others, from fitting into someone else's idea of who we should be, or from constantly seeking the next social high. True happiness comes from within, from embracing who we are and being at peace with that person. Living authentically means being true to yourself, regardless of what others think. It means letting go of the masks we put on to fit in, the personas we create to meet society's expectations. As we grow older, we become less concerned with impressing others. Instead, we become more focused on living a life that aligns with our own values, our own desires, and our own sense of self-worth. I've come to realize that the freedom of old age isn't about having fewer responsibilities or fewer obligations. It's about having the freedom to live on your own terms. It's about letting go of the need to impress others, to conform to someone else's idea of success or happiness. The true freedom of aging comes when you stop worrying about fitting into someone else's mold. You stop caring about what's expected of you and start caring more about what makes you feel fulfilled. And in that freedom, you find a peace that no amount of social events or external validation could ever provide. Living authentically is the true joy of old age. It's the joy of knowing who you are, of embracing your flaws and strengths, and of being unapologetically yourself. The pressure to conform disappears, and in its place comes a sense of self-acceptance and peace. You stop chasing after things that don't matter and start investing in the things that do. As you embrace who you truly are, without fear of judgment, you begin to realize that the only person you need to impress is yourself. And that is a freedom worth striving for. I've shared how we can grow into a more fulfilling life by valuing deep connections and learning to live without societal pressures. Letting go of the need for constant socializing, shifting focus to fewer but more meaningful relationships, and living authentically. This is where true happiness lies as we age. As we grow older, one fear often lingers in the background, the fear of aging alone. It's a fear that many of us face, whether we admit it or not. The thought of spending our later years without the company of loved ones, without the familiar faces of friends and family around us, can be unsettling. The idea of facing old age without someone by our side often feels like a heavy burden. We've been conditioned to believe that aging means solitude, and with that comes the notion of loneliness. The thought that one day we'll be left with only our thoughts, our memories, and our own company can feel overwhelming. But here's the thing, aging alone doesn't mean being lonely. It's a misconception that needs to be addressed. You see, solitude doesn't equate to emptiness. As we grow older, we often carry with us something far more valuable than the constant presence of others, our memories, our wisdom, and our inner peace. These are not things that can be taken from us. They are what shape us, what enrich our lives, and what give us strength, even when we find ourselves alone. As time goes on, many of us begin to realize that being alone isn't as frightening as it once seemed. In fact, it can be incredibly fulfilling. When you're young, the idea of being alone may seem like a punishment, a fate to be avoided at all costs. But as you age, you start to see things differently. You come to understand that being alone doesn't mean being disconnected. You've lived a life full of experiences, relationships, and lessons, and these things stay with you. They become part of who you are. They help you navigate life, even in its quieter moments. Aging alone doesn't mean that you've been abandoned or forgotten. It means you've reached a point where you've found peace in your own company. It's not about being without others, it's about being okay with yourself, with your thoughts, with the life you've lived. You've learned that fulfillment doesn't come from the constant need for companionship or validation. It comes from knowing that you've done your best, that you've lived authentically, and that you've loved deeply, even if not always in the way others expect. In the process of growing older, one of the most important gifts you can give yourself is the ability to love your own company. The world often pressures us to look outside ourselves for happiness, to find it in the company of others, in the validation of peers, in the constant need for activity and stimulation. But as we age, we learn that the greatest joy comes from within. The ability to be content with yourself, to find peace and satisfaction in your own presence, is something no one can take away. Self-love doesn't mean being self-centered or ignoring the world around you. It means accepting who you are, appreciating what you've accomplished, and finding comfort in the simple act of being with yourself. It's about trusting that your own company is enough. It's about understanding that you don't need to fill every moment with distractions or the presence of others to feel complete. As we age, we're given the opportunity to truly learn what self-love means. It's not about vanity or self-importance. It's about the quiet, internal recognition that you are worthy of love and respect, just as you are. That love doesn't depend on the approval of others or the validation of social circles. It's rooted in the understanding that you have everything you need to feel whole, even when you're alone. Final reflection. Throughout our lives, we are told that we must have a wide circle of friends, that we must always be socially active to lead fulfilling lives. We are told that to be truly happy, we need to be constantly surrounded by people. But as we grow older, we begin to see the truth. Solitude, far from being something to fear, becomes a path to self-discovery. It is in these quieter moments that we come to understand ourselves better, that we learn to appreciate the richness of our own thoughts, our own experiences, and our own company. The focus of our relationships also shifts. No longer is the goal to accumulate more friends or attend more events. Instead, we learn that quality is far more important than quantity. The relationships that truly matter are the ones that have stood the test of time, the ones that are built on understanding, trust, and mutual respect. These are the connections that provide us with lasting joy, and they are the ones we should nurture in our later years. In embracing solitude and living authentically, we find the freedom to be ourselves without the need for external approval. We find that the pressure to constantly socialize, to constantly prove our worth, fades. And in that freedom, we discover a deeper sense of peace, one that allows us to truly enjoy the company of others when we choose to be with them and to find contentment when we are alone. I encourage you to reflect on your own relationships and your own journey. What brings you joy? How have your relationships changed as you've gotten older? How can you cultivate deeper, more meaningful connections with the people who matter most? And more importantly, how can you learn to appreciate your own company, to find joy and peace in the quiet moments? As we age, we have the opportunity to redefine what friendship means. It's no longer about filling our lives with an endless number of acquaintances. It's about finding those relationships that truly nourish us, that bring us joy, that provide us with a sense of belonging. But it's also about learning to live joyfully, whether we're surrounded by loved ones or simply enjoying the peace of our own company. So, I invite you to share your thoughts and experiences. Let's open up the conversation about aging, solitude, and friendship. Let's redefine what it means to live joyfully in our later years, and let's support one another in creating lives that are rich with meaning, no matter how many people are by our side. Whether we are alone or surrounded by loved ones, we can find fulfillment and peace. Let's embrace this next chapter with courage, with authenticity, and with love, for ourselves and for those who truly matter. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring content. May your wisdom grow brighter with every step. Thank you for joining us on Flame of Wisdom.